Today is the 7th day of February 2015, and we are with Alok again in our continuing series on Savitri. So we are still in Book 1, Canto 3.
The soul's release from ignorance. So what we see in this canto, Sri Aurobindo describes some of the changes, some of the effects of entering into that newer, higher, greater consciousness. And the mother spoke of this particular canto and Canto 5 that this is what the new man would be. Right now, these powers, these faculties of knowledge, we see in Canto 3, Sri Aurobindo describes how oft inspiration with its lightning feet, the nature of cognition and understanding through the rational processes, by analysis of the surface, that will change completely. Because right now we look at the surface data, we analyze it, and we conclude based on reason. And that's what we call knowledge.
And it's mostly empirical?
It's empirical, even when it is statistical and we have a whole lot of data.
Yeah.
It still gives us only the surface knowledge. That's why the mother called the modern science as the science of appearances. So, we know all about the foam and froth of the sea. Mm-hmm. We know all that floats on it. We know the waves on the surface, but we don't know we can just fathom a little bit that there is a tremendous power in its depth. But it remains still, more a matter of belief, non-belief, guesswork, imagination, rather than something concrete. And when we begin to get free from this clutch of ignorance, where we are identified with the body, mind, vital complex, with name, surname, dresses, vocations, degrees, etc., etc., a new self-knowledge emerges, and we know ourselves as the immortal soul. It's no more something which is somebody has told us, so we believe in it. Because we can't pretend it. If we believe in it simply because somebody has told us, at the first knock at our doors of the unseen fate, it will show up. So, it's a new self-knowledge. And along with that new self-knowledge of who we are, there comes a new way of dealing with life. A kind of mastery where we walk as masters of our fate. We choose. We are not helpless serfs moving and tossed about by the seas and by circumstances. And along with that, because we are able to now see the deeper play of forces, we read that, beings less circumscribed than mortal men, and through a new kind of sights and sounds and smells, which begin to reveal the hidden forces at play. The mother, when she would hear a music note, she would sometimes feel the vibration inside and say this is from the higher world. Even with Beatles, some notes she would say that. So she was not judging based on anything external, that this is Indian classical, therefore this must be like this. It was not that at all. Similarly, when people would come and say certain things, she would feel for the vibration, and based on that she would speak up.
And she even said, they think I can't hear.
Yes. They think I can't hear.
But I can hear.
I can hear and see much more clearly.
Yes.
So, it's a totally new understanding of world, of the forces at play. And as we read last time, that he abode himself in undivided time.
Yes.
So right now we, based on the past, project into the future. And we know how miserable we are when we do this. All the time something else comes and topples all our plans. But that's how we are, and obviously we have to use that.
Yes.
But in this new kind of knowledge, we see the past, the present and the future held together. And as we grow into it, more and more, our actions are not circumscribed to apprehensions of what is going to be, but with a certitude of knowledge. And the best part is that even when we know it, we take a certain course of action, even if we know that there may be an immediate failure in our acts, because it yet puts a groove in nature towards in that direction. So when Sri Aurobindo was asked that you must have known about the Cripps proposal, why did you send the emissary, Durai Swami? And he said that, well, it is to determine yet the groove of the future. So that means the actions are no more for immediate success, but for long-term gains. We see not just what is going to happen immediately.
And Mother has named the flower disinterested work.
Yes,
done for the divine.
Very, very true. In fact, one of her prayers speaks about it. And she says, even when we work for the divine, there should be disinterestedness. And I still remember that was one of the prayers I opened this 1995, no, before that, 1993 or 92, when I was given some work for the center there in Bangalore, and I prayed to her for guidance, and I opened this. And it shook me to the core. Because I said, this is your work and you are asking me to be disinterested. So I looked at the dictionary meanings, and slowly the sense dawned upon me. The real sense dawned after 3-4 years, that why this was the first guidance given. So, disinterested work is, otherwise we are so much result oriented, which brings frustration. And that's why man is not given the foreknowledge, because unless he is equipped with that right consciousness and the right attitude, he will immediately put his hands up. And we don't realize sometimes immediate failures and maybe many successive failures open the door to a future success. Sri Aurobindo says the world has advanced through half a dozen revolutions, which were mostly failures in their own time.
His failure is not failure.
Whom God
God
leads.
leads.
And we see India's freedom struggle in 1857. All the beautiful people from Jhansi Rani and Tatia Tope and all of them, it was a failed thing. And yet it lit up a fire. So it's very interesting that this consciousness, new consciousness, it is going to change the way we understand the world, the way we deal with it. And as we were reading, even in plants, animals and inanimate objects, we become aware of a secret consciousness. So our dealing changes. It's not because somebody tells us mentally, not because of a moral, social or religious rule, but simply because we see things differently and therefore we do differently. And that's what is summarized towards the end. Also something very important which comes in between, that this is not a sudden process. So very often people believe that you are either in ignorance or knowledge, like a, like a push button automatic system, because we are used to that. You put a switch and suddenly there is illumination. Well, in a fundamental part there is illumination like that, but then there are other rooms. So slowly, once this illumination takes place and there is a reversal of consciousness, then it begins to touch upon other parts and it grows. So the aspirant momentarily enters into states of true knowledge, and then he lapses back into states of ignorance where other parts are struggling with nature. And Sri Aurobindo reveals marvelously, this too the supreme diplomat can use.
Yes.
He makes our fall a means of greater rise.
Yeah. There's that line also, only a while these higher states.
Yes, that's it. So that's the same passage.
Yes.
We can
Exactly.
read that before, page 34. And he gives the various reasons. The body pulls us back, the vital needs pull us back, the mind pulls us back, and the subconscious, even if we throw away things from these parts, they go into the subconscious. A long process. So we have this line, only a while at first these heavenlier states. These large, wide poised upliftings could endure. The high and luminous tension breaks too soon. The body's stone stillness and the life's hushed trance. The breathless might and calm of silent mind, or slowly they fail as sets a golden day. So you see, this opens doors of understanding. Now there are mystics who have one experience and it's a very powerful experience. And based on that, based on the memory of that experience, because all the time one is not dwelling there, it would need a perpetual trance. They make a whole theory, and then, understanding, and people flock, and etc., etc.
Yeah.
But Sri Aurobindo is a perfect perfectionist. So he says it's not enough. Everything must change. And that's why the integral yoga. So here, because one has a big, high experience or a realization, one doesn't feel satisfied, I had something wonderful. No, one is spurred on to move on, move on, move on. Other hills to be conquered, to be climbed. And then there is no end, because as the consciousness expands and other lives get included into our own, that's what we read last time, then there are no limits potentially.
Yeah.
So it's such a wonderful thing that it's a limitless yoga.
Yes. Yes.
It doesn't stop with some wonderful awakening, enlightenment, as they say, and then you have to preach others. No. It is something limitless. Even when we are sharing the joy like we are doing now, we are like children moving together. Maybe a couple of inches this way, that way. But it opens such infinite vistas, and that gives a great joy, at least personally to me, that there is no such end point. If there are end points, then it's like, okay, finished. So what?
Yeah.
Now what?
Yes.
So, and then, but look at, how beautifully.
Yeah.
So when we come back time to time to this blind driven inertia of our base, we are pulled down. So page 34, few lines below. This too, the supreme diplomat can use. The divine is the diplomat. So what does he do? He makes our fall a means for greater rise. So of course, this is not an excuse for falling, but this is a wonderful hope. And I'm sure all of us who have gone through this process understand what it means. How, he comes into those parts. For into ignorant nature's gusty field, into the half-ordered chaos of mortal life. See, there is so much humor in Savitri.
Yes.
Look at the half-ordered chaos of mortal life. The formless power, the self of eternal light, follow in the shadow of the Spirit's descent. The twin duality forever one chooses its home mid the tumults of the sense.
And then this next part.
He comes unseen into our darker parts, and curtained by the darkness does his work, a subtle and all-knowing guest and guide, till they too feel the need and will to change. So each part has to consciously choose the divine. We can put pressure to make the choice, but we cannot choose for that part. So as other parts open up, they can put a pressure. A pressure is automatically created, in fact, as the force field of the divine grows within us. But in the beginning, early stages, in some people, it can lead to great resistances also. Because they feel the pressure for change. That's why many times coming to Pondicherry, living in the mother's physical atmosphere, and Sri Aurobindo's presence was so difficult. And even now, many people, because imbalances. Because, if the other parts are not willing to change, and they have to be willing to change, you can't just exterminate them, you can't just put a, blinding cloth over them, and you can't just coerce them. You can gently put a pressure of the higher parts, but they have to feel the need and will to change.
And in the past, it was suppression.
Suppression, or a denial, or simply letting it have its own way.
Yeah, yes.
That also yogis, many times yogis, when they behave, strangely, people don't understand. But a part of them has broken free from the normal boundaries of society.
Yes.
And other parts are still struggling. So, he's in a strange situation. He's neither human, nor animal, nor a god. Or maybe a part of him is living in a wider consciousness, but other parts are still a cross between the demigod and the beast. So it creates a strange situation. And there are yogis who are known to have, and sometimes their nature can completely go haywire. So it's not an easy process, and that's why Sri Aurobindo would talk about call, readiness, fitness for the path. It's not a free for all that just about anyone just walks in. Well, walking in one can, but at one's own peril. So he would take so much study the person. The nature has to bear it. It's a tremendous power.
And we did talk about last time
Yes.
that certain people
Yes.
he did not want
And
to do
some
the yoga.
yes, and some people had to be sent away. And a classical case is of Tirupati. See, Tirupati was one of those 4 persons in whom the 4 great pillars of immortality were being incarnated. The other was Champaklalji, Dr. Rajangam, and one more I may be forgetting. But in Tirupati, Sri Aurobindo wanted to incarnate the pillar of faith. And he lost his mind. He started feeling that I am God, I am Avatar, I am all these things. So he had to be sent away. And Sri Aurobindo looked after him every way, but he couldn't stay near because he would feel that pressure. So that's why a strong adhar, a balanced, if the other thing happens that one feels very despondent when one confronts these parts in nature. Initially we believe we are the best and everybody is rot. Then you begin to discover that we carry a little bit of that rot inside us, which is coloring our eyes. And then it's not easy because it's literally open a room which has been closed for centuries and everything there is in pell-mell and it has to be set right.
I know of a person, a lady, who was very sincere, really a devotee, wanting to do the integral yoga, lived here for years, and went to Mother one day and Mother said, "This yoga is not for you."
Yes.
And she went back to her own country, has a beautiful life, family, children.
Absolutely. And even some people, she would say, there are letters of Sri Aurobindo that you stay there and do the yoga. Because, in fact, very strangely, Sri Aurobindo says that this lady whose girl's father writes to Sri Aurobindo, and he says it is better if she stays there and does the yoga because she is blossoming her very beautifully and her psychic is developing very fast. But if she comes here, suddenly she will be surrounded by difficulties which she may not be able to take. So you see, the way the divine looks at life and that consciousness is very different from our little limited human consciousness. And many times he would say, even if you come here, nothing will happen. That also he has said. And a classical example was where people said that, those who are nearest to you will get transformed earlier, it seems. And he said, in that case, my table would be the first one. So the block of wood becomes sometimes a block of stone or iron because the resistance can, grow so much. So this is how this process goes, and that is beautifully described in this canto, like the waxing and the waning of the moon. So there are days, weeks, months when we are in a beautiful state. And then there are days, weeks, even sometimes months. Sri Aurobindo speaks of, initially it can be like that everything gets clouded. And then the only support is Mother's name and faith. And then again it's uplifted. Till finally these periods of, these dark periods become lesser and lesser and lesser, till we begin to live in the light of that consciousness more and more.
But have we not all experienced that?
Oh, no one can go through, and it's an endless process because, as I said, then it goes beyond oneself, and we have the same, little bit below. Always the power poured back like sudden rain. So the rain of the Vedic rishis, they spoke about the rain. Or slowly in his breast a presence grew. It clambered back to some remembered height or soared above the peak from which it fell. So the whole process is so beautifully described in Savitri.
And what a word, clambered.
Clambered back. And see, it is described in a marvelous way. And even it can soar beyond.
Yes.
Each time he rose, there was a larger poise, a dwelling on a higher spirit plane. The light remained in him a longer space. In this oscillation between earth and heaven, in this ineffable communion's climb, there grew in him, as grows a waxing moon, the glory of the integer of his soul. So this is the process of release from ignorance. So beautifully described. It's not like a one-point enlightenment where suddenly on one day you wake up from samadhi and say, I got it. Now I have to only tell others about it. So it's so wonderful. It's a 24/7 yoga. And the beauty is, it's not about you, some people take it in this way, I have to remain straight. No. She's doing the yoga and you have to become more and more conscious of her doing the yoga. And then this 24/7 engagement is so wonderful. You start taking delight in it. Otherwise the life appears so meaningless and absurd when you are not able to feel that. So,
and how can human effort do this yoga?
It's impossible. So this is the consciousness in which Ashapati grows, and obviously then, page 44, 45, the last bit of this canto. Thus came his soul's release from ignorance, his mind and body's first spiritual change. So this is the first transformation that takes place, a spiritualization of our motives, of our vision, of our way of life. It's not yet the supramental change, but this is the first aspect. A wide God knowledge poured down from above. God knowledge and wide God knowledge. There is a God knowledge about the divine's one aspect or another aspect, or divine in one way or the other, like, whether he is impersonal or whether he is personal, whether he is universal, whether he is individual, all kinds of experiences people have. But this is a wide God knowledge which combines these aspects of the divine and reveals it in a multitudinous way behind creation. So it's a wide God knowledge, a new world knowledge broadened from within. There is a new set of eyes we get and a new, set of will and motives through which we act. His daily thoughts looked up to the true and one. His commonest doings welled from an inner light.
Welled from an inner light.
Commonest doings. So that's how all life becomes yoga. It's not that we can do anything and say that all life is yoga. When the consciousness is yogic, then the slightest of movements or everything, taking a walk in the garden, or even, as mother says, watching a movie. She has watched movies, and when the movies would come, mother would have some exceptional experiences. At one point she says there was a movie on Prahlad, the boy who, in the fifth avatar of Vishnu, Nursing avatar. When mother watched this movie and when he was doing Hari Mantra, mother says that all my hairs began to stand. I could see the power of this mantra. But equally, when she would watch Blue Lagoon, she would say, there were some wonderful things. So, it's not the conventional, traditional, religious, orthodox, doctrinal knowledge.
Even Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. And she has spoken about it.
Yeah, at length. So the inner meaning of all of those.
Yes. So it's a very different kind of a knowledge which shows you the hidden truth behind the commonest things. And that, what that world is very difficult to talk about it. It is something to be experienced. And the other day, I think just few days back, I was telling someone it's difficult to explain how one begins to experience the mother's presence and her grace in the smallest of things. It's difficult because it will be a whole Mahabharata after Mahabharata, and somebody would well think that you are crazy. Why you are dragging mother in everything? Mother should be only when you are meditating in your silent space of the soul. But everything she manifests, and we have to just a little contact, and then life becomes a gratitude, nothing else.
Yes.
So here is Ashwapati. Last 4 lines on this page. Apart, he lived in his mind's solitude. Who would understand such a being?
Yes.
When somebody asked Sri Aurobindo, sir, what are you doing in Pondicherry? Sri Aurobindo took a while and then he said, well, nothing. What could he say? What he was experiencing? Well, nothing. Apart, he lived in his mind's solitude. A demigod shaping the lives of men. Look at the beauty of these 2 lines when seen in conjunction. Apart, he lived in his mind's solitude is one. But it is not the solitude of a lonely thinker who goes above all. It is a power that in its solitude is shaping the lives of men.
Yeah.
What is this power? That sitting in a small little room in Pondicherry, then an obscure ghost town full of murderers and rogues, he is reaching out to a prisoner in concentration camp.
Yeah.
Reaching out across the world without an aircraft, all the way to draw a fashion designer from America and the president's daughter.
Yes.
Who can imagine what is that power? So, a demigod shaping the lives of men. One soul's ambition lifted up the race. A power worked, but none knew whence it came. The universal strengths were linked with his, filling earth's smallness with their boundless breadths. So gods are waiting for such a being to act.
Yes.
He drew the energies that transmute an age. And then this last line, how beautiful, last 2 lines.
Yes.
His walk through time outstripped the human stride. So what Sri Aurobindo is and what he has done, I think it will take us at least 3 centuries to understand, and maybe a couple of centuries more, very hopefully, to experience that life in its fullness. Of course, by Mother's grace, one experiences all the touches, but that fullness of that life. So he is what the Superman would be, or the supramental being would be in future. So if somebody wants to know what the supramental being would be, so the simplest answer is look at Sri Aurobindo.
Yes.
Don't have to read books and analyze it. Look at Sri Aurobindo.
And the last
The
line.
last line. Lonely his days and splendid like the sun's. So the sun in its loneliness sheds light to all upon this entire creation on earth, on everything. The sun is there in the grain of dust, and the sun is there in the grain that we eat. The sun is there like a torture in the Sahara, and the sun is there like a warm glow of light in the Arctic pole. The sun is there, and we cannot imagine life without the sun. But he is there, out there, lonely.
Only his days.
So, such is the supramental life. And then we can just touch upon little bit on the secret knowledge, or shall we just take a few minutes break? Maybe then we can start.